He stood next to her casket and said the word thief. Not about a stranger. About me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at the man I once protected from every scraped knee and broken heart and realized that grief doesn't change people. It reveals them. My name is Elise Harper. I'm 32 years old, and I come from a family where silence is mistaken for consent, and patience is considered weakness. I used to think I was the peacekeeper. The one who smoothed things over, made people feel heard. But the truth is, I was just making it easier for everyone else to ignore the cracks. Until she died. Until I became the executor of her will. My grandmother, Margaret Lane, passed away on a rainy Wednesday morning in April. It wasn't unexpected. She was 88, and her health had been slipping for months. But knowing someone is going doesn't cushion the blow. I sat beside her bed until the nurses made me leave, holding her thin, cold fingers as if I could will some part of her to stay. My brother, Adam, didn't come. He said he was handling arrangements, but by the time I got back to her house, there was already a locksmith changing the front door. That was my first warning. The second came when I noticed the heirloom ring missing from her dresser, the one she'd promised me when I was 17, after I got into college on a scholarship nobody in our family believed I could get. A blue topaz set in gold. Nothing extravagant, just hers. Just ours. Adam shrugged when I asked. Said maybe the hospice staff took it. He looked me in the eye and said. She probably didn't even know what she wanted in the end. You know how confused she was. But I knew better. My grandmother wasn't confused. She was deliberate. And 2 days later, I found the envelope she'd hidden behind the kitchen spice rack. My name on the outside. Her handwriting inside. 2 pages, written in blue ink. The last thing she ever gave me. She wrote. Don't let them turn you into a ghost in your own life. Speak when it matters. That letter changed everything. At the wake, I was quiet. Distant, maybe. But not because I didn't care. I just couldn't play the part this time, the sister who nods politely when Adam calls himself the favorite grandchild, the niece who smiles as relatives talk about how much grandma loved all of us equally. I watched the lies pile up like floral arrangements. And I waited. The morning of the funeral, I stood at the foot of her grave in a black dress she once complimented, simple, cotton, no shine. I wore her brooch too, the one Adam must have forgotten about, pinned near my collarbone like a warning. He made his little speech beside the casket. Tears in his voice, not in his eyes. Said she was a woman of generosity and grace. Said she wouldn't have wanted drama. Then he added. And it breaks my heart that some people have taken advantage of her death, taken things that weren't theirs. There was a pause. And then his eyes found mine. Right in front of 30 people, relatives, neighbors, a pastor who barely knew her. That was when I walked up to the pastor and whispered something. He blinked. Confused. Then nodded. And said. We'll be pausing the service. There's been a change in the arrangements. Gasps. Murmurs. My aunt demanded to know what was going on. Adam turned red, the kind of red that rises from the neck, hot and full of disbelief. I turned to the crowd and said, calmly. There won't be a burial today. I've submitted a formal injunction. The funeral is delayed. People started to move toward me, voices overlapping, confusion, anger, questions. I stood still. I said. There are documents. Letters. And decisions that weren't his to make. Then I walked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small for doing it. What followed wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was colder than that. Quieter. More final. I drove straight to my grandmother's house. I had the key, the legal one. And I had the letter. The one that said I was the executor. Not Adam. What I didn't know yet was how far he'd already gone. Or how many people had helped him. I opened the door to her study, expecting dust and silence. What I found instead was a box full of her bank records, some shredded, some half-scorched, as if someone had tried to destroy them in a hurry and failed. And right on top, a receipt. For a wire transfer. To Adam. 3 weeks before she died. I sat down, carefully, not trusting my own legs. My hands shook, but my mind didn't. He hadn't just lied. He'd stolen. And now I had to decide. Do I expose him, publicly, completely, even if it tears the rest of the family apart? Or do I let it go, let them all believe what they want, and carry the truth alone? A car door slammed outside. Footsteps. Not on the front walk. On the gravel path behind the house. He didn't knock. He still had a key. And this time, he wasn't here to apologize. His key still worked. That told me everything I needed to know. I didn't move. The floor creaked 2 rooms away, then silence. No knocking, no calling my name. Just the casual entitlement of someone who never imagined he'd be questioned. I folded the receipt. Slid it into my boot. Not my purse. My boot. Then I waited. The door to the study opened slowly, like a hand slipping into someone else's pocket. Adam stood there, still in his funeral suit, jacket open, tie gone. He looked at me like I was the intruder. Like he was owed an explanation. He said, "You need to stop this." I didn't answer. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, too softly. He scanned the box on the desk, the half-burned papers, the empty air where her portrait used to hang. His jaw shifted once, the way it used to when we were kids and he got caught in a lie too early. He said, "You're ruining everything she built." I replied, "She built it. You tried to sell it." That landed. He flinched, barely, but enough. Then he tried the softer tactic, the one he used on girlfriends and our mother, gentler voice, lowered head, faux patience. He said, "I know you're upset. We all are. But there's no need to make this worse." Worse. As if the theft was an accident. As if grieving gave him permission. I didn't respond. I turned and picked up the stack of singed bank statements. They were still warm. Whoever had tried to burn them used the fireplace in the guest room, the one with the broken flue. He always was careless. I said, "You wired yourself $70,000. He didn't deny it. Just laughed. Quiet, dry. He said, "She wanted me to have it. You weren't even around at the end." I looked at him then, really looked. And I saw it. He hadn't expected to be caught, not because he was clever, but because he thought I'd stay quiet. Like always. But I wasn't that woman anymore. He took a step toward me. I didn't back up. He said, "So what's your plan? Blow up the family over a few wires and old paper?" I said, "You already did that." He left after that. No apology. No threats. Just the simmering certainty of someone who still believed he'd win. When the door clicked shut behind him, I sat back down. Not to cry. To write. The injunction I filed was temporary. I had 72 hours before a judge would demand proof of mismanagement. I needed to organize what I had, and fast. I made piles. Dates, accounts, names. I rechecked the flash drive I'd found in the freezer behind a bag of peas. Her hiding spots were always creative. It was encrypted, of course. But her password patterns hadn't changed since 2006. 2 hours later, I was staring at a full scan of her revised will. Dated 6 months before her death. Witnessed. Notarized. I was listed as executor. Sole one. Adam was removed entirely, with one line in her handwriting. Repeated breaches of trust. Reallocation of assets necessary. My breath left me like a weight I'd been holding too long. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. She'd seen it too. But the will had never been filed. And that opened a crack wide enough for a dozen cousins, 2 aunts, and my mother to wedge their narratives through. They were already whispering. Already choosing sides. And I knew which side had more mouths. That night I slept on the couch in her sunroom, wrapped in the quilt she used to drape over my shoulders during storms. The house creaked the same way it always had, the slow wooden sighs of an old woman who kept too many secrets in her walls. In the morning, I woke to my phone vibrating under my leg. A text from my cousin Laura. "Hey, just heard from Adam. What's going on with the funeral delay? This is not like you. Not like me." The words stuck. She meant it kindly. But that was the problem. I used to be the one who didn't make trouble. The one who forgave first, bent first, broke first. It made things easier. For everyone. I spent the rest of that morning calling lawyers. Not the ones the family knew, not the one who did wills in bulk or the one who used to flirt with my aunt at Christmas. I called a woman named Gina Morales, whose number had been underlined twice in my grandmother's address book. She answered on the second ring. I said, "My name is Elise Harper. I think Margaret Lane meant for you to handle something." There was a pause. Then she said, "If she left you my number, then yes. I believe I'm your counsel now." Calm. Professional. No surprise. She told me to bring the flash drive, the handwritten letter, and the revised will to her office by noon. I did. Gina's office was nothing like I expected, not wood-paneled and cozy, but steel and glass and quiet. The kind of place built for women who didn't apologize. She read everything. Asked smart, hard questions. Never once assumed I was mistaken. She said, "This is actionable. You have grounds for full control of the estate. But we'll need to move quickly, and you'll need to be ready for backlash." Backlash. That part one was already feeling. By sunset, my mother had left me a voicemail. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "You don't know what you're doing. Your brother's grieving. He's doing his best." Then she hung up. No sign off. I sat at the edge of the bed, phone in my hand, staring at the place where the rug no longer met the wall. Adam had moved furniture, trying to find other things he could claim. I wondered how many lies he'd already told. And to whom? There was a knock at the door. This time, it wasn't him. It was someone I hadn't seen in 10 years. Someone I never thought would show up again. And she was holding a manila envelope with my name in block letters across the front. Some names carry weight long after you stop saying them. Hers dropped into my doorway like a stone in my chest. I hadn't seen Miranda Foster since my late 20s, and I'd never expected to again. We were once close, in that fragile, adult sister kind of way women bond when their mothers are too busy, their brothers are too loud, and their boundaries are still soft enough to bend. Then she vanished, after a fight that wasn't really a fight, more a quiet withdrawal. She'd warned me about Adam. I hadn't listened. Now she was here, holding an envelope with my name on it and an expression I couldn't read. Not pity, not anger. Something between duty and apology. I stepped back, letting her inside without a word. She walked like she'd been here before, which she had, many times. She placed the envelope on the dining table and pulled out a chair. Saturday. Waited. I stood. She said, "She left me this to deliver. Told me to wait until after the funeral." I asked, "Why you?" She said, "Because I'd actually do it. Even if it meant seeing you again." Inside the envelope were 3 things, a USB stick, a printout of Margaret's living trust amendments, different from the ones I had, and a handwritten note dated 4 months ago, sealed in a Ziploc bag like my grandmother knew paper could be fragile in the wrong hands. Miranda waited as I read. She didn't speak. Didn't move. I think she knew the weight of what she carried. Maybe she'd been carrying it too long. The note was short. Elise, if you're reading this, it means Adam pushed too far. He thinks charm is currency. I saw the accounts. I saw the lies. You have the truth now. Do what I couldn't. I'm tired. I closed my eyes. Just for a second. The sentence "I'm tired" cut deeper than anything else. Not because she was weak, she wasn't. But because she'd spent too many years cleaning up other people's mistakes. And now I understood how exhausting that really was. When I looked up, Miranda was watching me. I said, "Why did you stop talking to me?" She didn't hesitate. She said, "Because I knew one day you'd have to choose between protecting him and protecting yourself. And I couldn't watch you choose wrong." I didn't have an answer for that. Not yet. She left without asking to stay. Without asking anything. But she left her number. I stared at the back of the card she scribbled it on, a dry cleaning tag, of all things, and wondered what else she knew that I didn't. The next 48 hours blurred. Between the flash drives, the legal back and forth, and Adam's increasingly erratic texts, veiled threats couched as apologies, I started to feel the shape of the narrative he'd built. In his version, I was unstable. Isolated. Overreaching. He played it well, too, enough emotion to seem human, enough indignation to seem wronged. And people believed him. Of course they did. My mother called again. This time, she left a longer message. "I don't know what you're doing, Elise. This is not you. Your grandmother would hate this. You're turning us into enemies. For what, some paperwork? That's the thing about gaslighting. It doesn't have to be clever. It just has to wear you down. Word by word, until you're no longer sure if the page you're standing on is the one you wrote." I started losing sleep. Not from fear, I wasn't afraid of Adam. But from the sheer weight of managing perception. Of knowing every truth had to be 10 times more airtight than a lie, just to be heard. Gina, my lawyer, worked late into the nights with me. We sat on Zoom, her with glasses pushed to her forehead, me cross-legged on the floor of Margaret's study, pages spread around me like a forensic map. She said, "They'll push you toward settlement. That's what people like Adam do, make just enough noise to exhaust you into compromise." I said, "He's not getting another cent. Not this time." She nodded. Made notes. She didn't say it, but I could feel her respect for me growing. Not because I was aggressive. But because I hadn't run. Because I kept showing up, day after day, quiet and clear. But the pressure kept rising. 3 days before the court hearing to validate the amended will, a letter arrived. No return address. Thick stock paper, the kind that tries too hard to feel official. Inside was a photo. Me, leaving Gina's office. Adam's handwriting on the back, conflict of interest? Or just desperation? I burned it. Without hesitation. But the message was clear. He wasn't above surveillance. Or intimidation. Or dragging this through the mud if it meant keeping what he'd stolen. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't rest. I sat on the back porch and stared out at Margaret's overgrown garden, the rosemary gone wild, the roses tangled like stories no one had time to trim. I remembered planting them with her when I was 8. I remember her saying, "Things grow where they're loved. But they still need pruning." I hadn't known what she meant. Not then. Now, I did. The next morning, Gina called. She said, "He filed a motion. Claims the amendments are forgeries. Says you manipulated her when she was ill." My throat went dry. I said, "We have the medical records. We have the witnesses." She said, "It won't matter to his story. But it will matter to the court." She was right. There's truth, and then there's what people are willing to believe. I drove to the notary's office myself, the one who'd witnessed the changes to the trust. An older woman named Renata with a steel braid and eyes that missed nothing. She still had the logbook. Still had her copy. Still remembered my grandmother clearly. She said, "That woman was sharper than I am. If your brother thinks he can bury that, he's about to find out I don't burn easy." I exhaled. One small breath. And then it hit me, how many women were quietly holding up the truth behind the scenes. Miranda. Renata. Gina. Even Margaret, who'd trusted her gut enough to prepare for betrayal. They weren't loud. But they were immovable. That night, I received another message. Not from Adam. From Laura. She wrote, "You should hear what he's telling people, Elise. You need to speak. People are confused." It was the first crack in their side. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Not until I had everything ready. Because when I finally spoke, I wouldn't ask to be believed. I would prove it. 2 days left until the hearing. One more piece missing. And I knew exactly where to find it. It wasn't in a drawer. Or a bank. Or a flash drive. It was buried behind a lie. One only my mother could undo. And I was going to make her do it, in public. Some truths don't need to be discovered. They need to be forced into the light. I sat in my car outside my mother's townhouse, engine off, keys balanced on my knee, watching the shadow of her figure move past the window like a ritual she didn't realize I still remembered. She always lit the hallway lamp at 6 p.m, even in summer. Said it made the house feel occupied, even when no one felt welcome. She hadn't returned my last call. Hadn't answered my text. But I knew she'd be home. And I knew she wouldn't expect me to come to her. I knocked once. Then again. I waited. The door opened slowly. She didn't look surprised, just tired. The kind of tired that made it easier to cling to someone else's version of events than unravel your own role in it. She said, "This isn't the time, Elise." I stepped inside anyway. She stood in the entryway, arms folded, wearing that same linen blouse she wore to every funeral and every graduation, hers, mine, Adam's. A neutral costume for moments she didn't want to emotionally commit to. I didn't sit. I said, "There's a file. Margaret gave it to you a year ago. I need it now." Her face didn't change. That was how I knew I was right. She said, "That was private." She asked me not to get involved. I said, "You already are." She exhaled. Short. Controlled. Like she'd practiced that sigh in a mirror. She said, "Adam is your brother." I didn't respond. She walked into the living room and stood next to the bookshelf. Not the one with novels, the one with framed photos. I followed her gaze, the picture of me at 12, in braces and a ponytail, standing beside Adam at his high school graduation. He had an arm around me. I had none around him. She pulled a slim folder from the bottom shelf. Held it for a second too long. Then handed it to me. She said, "If you do this, there's no coming back." I said, "There was never anything to come back to." She flinched at that. But only slightly. I left without thanking her. Inside the folder were 6 printouts, emails between Margaret and her financial advisor. Confirming changes. Noting concerns. Documenting withdrawals Adam made without permission. They were timestamped. Signed. The final one was sent 3 weeks before she died. Elise must never be left out again. I was wrong. She always sees more than she says. I sent scans to Gina that night. Her reply came back in all caps. "We're done. We have them." I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I made tea at 2 a.m., stood barefoot on cold tile in Margaret's kitchen and stared at the spot on the wall where her spice rack used to hang. The place she hid the first letter. The place she trusted more than people. The house creaked again. But I wasn't afraid. The next morning, I got dressed in silence. Dark jeans. Gray sweater. No makeup. Gina said we didn't need dramatics, just presence. Just facts. The hearing was set for 10 a.m. Probate court. Small room. Wooden chairs. A judge with clear glasses and the kind of gaze that cuts through rehearsed stories. Adam arrived late. Of course he did. With a lawyer too polished for someone who claimed to be broke. He smiled when he saw me, like this was just another family misunderstanding we'd smooth over in time. He didn't know I had the emails. The notarized file. The backup drive Miranda had given me the night before. He didn't know I was done shrinking. Gina did most of the talking. She laid it out clearly, piece by piece, the trust, the amended will, the witness signatures, the financial records. The judge asked few questions. Just listened. And scribbled notes in the margins. Then it was Adam's turn. He tried charm first. Then confusion. Then he said. She was sick. She wasn't thinking straight. My sister manipulated her. She's always resented that Grandma trusted me more. I didn't react. Not even a blink. I let the silence make him uncomfortable. Gina handed over the final email. The one with Margaret's last sentence. The one about me seeing what others didn't. The judge read it twice. Then turned to Adam's lawyer. She said, "Would your client like to revise his position before I rule?" He didn't. She ruled. Clearly. Decisively. The revised will stood. I was the sole executor. Adam was removed entirely. She didn't use the word fraud. But she didn't have to. Outside the courtroom, he followed me to the sidewalk. He said, "You think this makes you better? You ruined everything." I replied, "No. You did. I just stopped cleaning up after you." Then I walked away. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like collapse. That night, I sat on the floor of the study and looked at the keys Margaret kept in the ceramic dish near the bookshelf. One for the house. One for the storage unit she rented across town. One I didn't recognize. I held it in my hand for a long time. The next morning, I drove to the storage unit. Her name was still on the lease. They let me in without question. Inside were 5 boxes. Labeled in her handwriting. One said, "For Elise, when it's quiet enough to hear me." I didn't open it right away. I sat with it for an hour. Just breathing. Because I knew whatever was inside wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about repair. And that was harder. Some boxes don't hold memories. They hold instructions for who you're supposed to become. The one marked, "For Elise, when it's quiet enough to hear me," sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit like it had been waiting. Like Margaret had known this moment would come, and that I wouldn't be ready for it until everything else had broken. I didn't open it right away. I walked around the unit, trailing my fingers across dust-lined lids and brittle masking tape. The other boxes were labeled in her same sharp handwriting: taxes, keep, photos, early, letters, never sent, and one that simply read, trust. That one, I'd open later. But not yet. Not before hers. I slid the first box toward me. Sat on the cold floor. Peeled the tape slowly. Inside, a journal. A tin box. A sealed envelope with a wax stamp. And a printed photo, me, age 5, sitting beside her in the garden. She'd written on the back. She asked what truth costs. I didn't know how to answer. The journal was hers. Not a diary, more like a map. Each page dated, careful. Notes on conversations, observations, numbers, hesitations. Moments where she doubted herself. And where she didn't. She'd documented everything. Adam's withdrawals. My mother's deflections. The attorney she'd spoken to before she found Gina. Even Miranda's name, with a note, loyal. Keep close. One page caught me by the throat. If I leave Elise with only money, they'll come for her again. But if I leave her with proof, peace, and permission, she might survive them. Permission. That word settled under my skin in a way I wasn't ready for. I'd spent so long apologizing for being the one who didn't need to be rescued. For not being louder, or sweeter, or more pliable. For walking away when people wanted me to stay and absorb the damage. She had known. And now she was showing me what survival would cost. Not just in loss. But in clarity. I took the envelope last. Slipped it open. A letter in her handwriting, not cursive, not stylized. Just clear. For me. Elise, if you've made it here, you already know more than most do in a lifetime. I won't insult you by repeating what you've learned. I will only say this, you are not broken for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for naming the truth. You are not alone, even when they pretend you are. I have always seen you. And I am not the only one. Below it, a single line. Bring the binder to the next family meeting. Then speak. I didn't want a meeting. I wanted distance. But I also wanted it done. The next day, I called my mother. Told her I needed everyone, immediate family only, to come to the house. One last time. She hesitated, but didn't argue. Curiosity is louder than guilt. They arrived in quiet waves. My mother first, then Laura. Then Adam, of course, last, but smug, like he was walking into an ambush he still thought he could control. We gathered in the living room. I'd cleared the space, no photographs, no distractions. Just chairs, water glasses, and a single black binder on the table. The one from the box labeled trust. I stood. They sat. And for the first time, no one interrupted me. I said, this is the last time we meet like this. I'm not asking for agreement. I'm offering truth. I opened the binder. Showed documents. Dates. Signed affidavits. Witness accounts. Financials. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I explained. Fact by fact. When I finished, no one said anything. Not my mother. Not Laura. Adam leaned forward. He said, you think this changes how they see you? I looked at him. Really looked. And saw nothing left that could touch me. I replied, no. It changes how I see you. That landed. Not with a crash, but with a thud. Final. Not dramatic. Just over. My mother stood slowly. Smoothed her sleeve. She said, we should go. I said, yes. You should. They left. One by one. No shouting. No apologies. Just absence. And then it was quiet again. Not silence. Just space. Enough for me to breathe. Later that night, I found one more note. Folded inside the tin box I hadn't opened yet. It was a receipt. From the local bookstore. Dated 6 years ago. Margaret had bought a book called Estrangement, Boundaries and the Courage to Let Go. I flipped it over. She'd written. You'll know when it's time. I did. And just before bed, a message lit up my phone. Miranda. 2 words. Ready when you are. Some peace doesn't arrive softly. It crashes through you when you finally stop bracing for noise. I stared at Miranda's message for a long time before replying. Come by tomorrow. Noon. I didn't ask what she meant. Didn't need to. She'd been part of this longer than I knew, trusted by Margaret, steady in silence. If she was still standing after the meeting, still willing to help, then I wasn't going to question it. The morning sun filtered through the study windows as I prepared. I brewed coffee, wiped the dust from the front table, set out 2 mugs. It felt domestic, almost peaceful, and I caught myself pausing in the doorway just to take it in. A still house. No banging doors. No urgent whispers behind closed rooms. Just breath. Mine. Miranda arrived 10 minutes early, wearing her usual, black jeans, soft gray blazer, no makeup. Practical. Unapologetic. She carried a folder under one arm and a canvas tote that looked heavier than it should. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. She sat. I poured coffee. She didn't drink it. Just opened the folder. Inside, a notarized statement. Dated 2 years ago. Her handwriting. Her signature. Witnessed. She slid it toward me like it was a quiet confession. She said, Margaret asked me to document what I saw. How Adam pressured her. The calls he made. The money she lent him that never came back. I asked, why didn't you give this to me earlier? She looked down. Not ashamed, just honest. She said, because part of me wanted you to walk away. Not because you were wrong. But because they didn't deserve you fighting this hard. I nodded. I understood. But I wasn't walking away. Not yet. She reached into the tote next. Pulled out a small black box, lacquered, heavy. I recognized it instantly. Margaret's old keepsake box from her sewing room. I hadn't seen it since I was a teenager. She used to keep buttons in it, old coins, and a few things she'd confiscated when we were kids. Miranda opened it. Inside, nestled in a layer of tissue, a necklace. Gold chain. Simple. But unmistakable. It was Margaret's wedding necklace. The one I hadn't seen since her husband, my grandfather, died 30 years ago. I'd asked about it once when I was 15. She'd said she put it away for a reason. Now Miranda handed it to me. She said, she wanted you to have it. Said it wasn't about the value. Said it was proof that some things don't get passed down unless they've been earned. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't. I just closed the box. Gently. By the time she left, the binder was updated, the files secured, and the final motion filed with the court, full control of the estate, asset redistribution per the revised will, and a formal cease and desist to any parties interfering with trust execution. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. The days that followed moved strangely, not fast, not slow. Just, precisely. Like the story had entered a new chapter without waiting for my permission. My mother didn't call. Neither did Laura. Adam sent one last message. Hope it was worth it. I didn't reply. Because it wasn't worth it, not in the way he meant. It was necessary. The hearing went through without objection. Gina didn't even need to speak much. The judge reviewed the new evidence, reviewed the timeline, and nodded. He said, this case is resolved. Executor Harper, you may proceed. Executor Harper. Not Elise. Not the one causing drama. Not the overreacting sister. Just a name with weight. Legally backed. Finally seen. I signed 3 sets of papers that afternoon. The estate was mine to manage. The accounts were restored. The property was fully transferred. Then I went home. Not to celebrate. To sit. In the garden. Margaret's garden. I pruned the rosemary. Pulled out the wild vines. Swept the back porch. I wasn't sure why. No one else would see it. But it felt like closing a loop. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the bank. Final balance sheets. Including a note in the margin, disbursement to Charity X confirmed. She'd left 20% of her wealth to an education fund for women re-entering the workforce. I didn't know that. No one did. She didn't just protect me. She made sure others like me would have options too. I walked to the garage that night. Opened the cabinet above the tools. Found the last thing she'd ever hidden from me, a key to the safe deposit box I thought had been closed years ago. The bank clerk opened it for me the next morning. Inside, a letter. A check. And a single photo. The letter was addressed to Adam. Unsent. If you're reading this, it means Elise didn't destroy you. You did that yourself. I hope one day you learn the difference. I didn't send it to him. I shredded it. Because I didn't need him to learn. I just needed me to let go. But the photo? That I kept. It was of me, age 8, asleep on Margaret's lap during Thanksgiving. Everyone else blurred in motion, arms, plates, chatter. But we were still. Centered. Peaceful. That night, I framed it. Placed it in the front hallway. Just one symbol. That I was no longer apologizing for being the one who noticed everything and said nothing. Now, I notice. And act. I poured myself a glass of water. Sat at the kitchen table. And began drafting a letter. To someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Not family. Someone who'd once asked me why I always made room for people who wouldn't do the same. I didn't know then. I think I do now. Because I was raised to think love meant carrying silence. But Margaret, in her quietest, fiercest way, gave me permission to speak. The doorbell rang. Once. Then again. And I knew, without checking, who it was. Some endings don't close the door. They stand open, quiet, resolved, and irreversible. I walked to the front door without hesitation. Because when you've already stood in court, sat through lies, buried what you once protected, what's left to fear from a doorbell? It wasn't Adam. It wasn't Laura. It wasn't even my mother. It was my father. I hadn't seen him in 6 years. Not since he moved to Oregon with a woman named Jane and told us all, over dinner, that he was tired of being needed. He looked older. Not sick, just softer. Like time had finally sanded down the sharpness that once made him impossible to ask for anything. He said, "I heard what you did." I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside instead. Closed the door behind me. We stood on the porch, between a cracked flower pot and the sound of wind through rosemary. I said, "She left me everything because no one else would have protected it." He nodded. Once. He said, "She called me last year. Asked me to write you a letter." I didn't. I said, "I know." He blinked. That old habit, swallowing shame without chewing it. He said, "I thought it would only make things worse. That I'd just disappear and make room." I said, "You already did." That hung in the air between us. But there was no accusation in my voice. Just acknowledgement. Of what was. Of what never really had a name. He handed me a folded sheet of paper. Not in an envelope. Creased, worn. I didn't open it yet. He said, "I'm not here to ask for anything." I believed him. He left before I could respond. Walked down the steps, hands in his jacket pockets, like he didn't need closure, just witness. Back inside, I opened the note. 6 lines. His handwriting, surprisingly neat. "You were always the calm one. The one who noticed when other people were hurting, even when you were hurting too. I didn't know how to raise someone like you. But I'm proud of who you raised yourself to be." I folded it in half. Tucked it inside the front cover of Margaret's journal. Let it be part of the story. But not the center. The days that followed were oddly light. Not happy. Not relieved. Just still. No letters. No voicemails. No drama. I walked the neighborhood each morning. Cleaned out drawers. Closed accounts. Donated clothes. Made peace with how many versions of me no longer fit the life I was building. I kept the house. Not because I needed the space. But because I wanted the memory to have a home. Gina helped me set up the fund in Margaret's name, for women re-entering college after age 30. I named it Lane Forward. Quiet, simple, like her. Miranda joined the board. She didn't say much about it. Just showed up one morning with a binder, a budget draft, and a bag of blueberry scones. I told her thank you. She said, it was never about Adam. And I knew she was right. It was about untying the grip of silence. One afternoon in early fall, I stood in the backyard with a rake and gloves, gathering what summer had let go of. The leaves crunched like soft paper. The air smelled like citrus and earth. I was halfway through when I heard the gate swing open. Laura. She looked thinner. Eyes darker. But not defeated. She held out a small padded envelope. She said, I found this in one of Mom's cabinets. It's yours. She wouldn't have told you. I took it. Didn't open it yet. I asked, why bring it to me now? She hesitated. Looked down. Then back at me. She said, because I watched you do what none of us would. And I'm not sure I liked you for it. But I respected it. Then she added, almost as an afterthought. She said, you were right. Even if it made everything harder. I didn't answer. I just nodded. She left without needing forgiveness. And I didn't offer it. Because some things just are. And that was enough. Inside the envelope, a photograph. Of Margaret, standing next to her mother, my great-grandmother, on the steps of a small house in Alabama. On the back, Margaret had written. She gave me nothing but strength. So I gave you the same. That night, I cooked something I hadn't made in years, lemon soup with thyme and barley. Margaret's favorite. I ate it at the kitchen table with the lights low, the house quiet. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt intact. Later, I took the framed photo from the hallway, the one of her and me from Thanksgiving, and placed it on the bedside table. Next to the journal. Next to the black necklace box. Next to nothing else. Because I wasn't filling my space with ghosts anymore. Just legacy. And the woman who gave it to me without ever raising her voice. I turned off the lamp. Climbed into bed. And somewhere between the stillness and the sound of wind outside, I let the weight go. Not all of it. Just enough. Subscribe if you want more stories about real women who don't scream. They act. Quietly. To the end.